Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to another episode. If you've noticed, the US dollar gains popularity every time a recession happens. That's what's been happening lately with the coronavirus pandemic and also the 2008 financial crisis. Every time a recession happens, people start flocking to the US dollar thinking that it's a secure asset. Why is this the case? Why would you buy a currency that has been printed over 25% of the already circulated value within a few months period? If you ever try to buy a commodity or asset or you trade, you've probably realized that you have to buy the US dollar to do these trades. If you don't, you're probably paying some form of premium that your broker or your account is charging you. In the UK and Europe, we have something called eToro where we can trade. And I've noticed that every time I put money onto the account, it converts everything into the US dollar, which is a little bit annoying because I'd like to buy things in my own currency. What people forget is that almost all commodities in the world, almost all stocks, equities is traded in the US dollar. Even countries trade between themselves in the US dollar because they know it's a secure asset or relatively secure asset. Up to 50% of the world's trade happens in the US dollar. And this is what makes people buy the US dollar every time they think a recession is going to happen. What is the currency that people sell into after they realize they need to sell their assets because they're going to go through a recession? It's the US dollar. And because most securities and ETFs in Europe, America, Asia, most countries around the world trade in the US dollar, most people when they sell, they buy or have to buy, they're forced to buy the US dollar. And this is knowledge that almost every trader knows. This is why the US dollar starts gaining value before people start thinking a recession is going to hit. So this is why even though 25% of the US dollar in circulation has been printed this very year in 2020 by the US government in terms of stimulus packages to save the US economy from the pandemic situation, people are still buying the US dollar and the US dollar hasn't dropped as much value as it should. And you can see the value of the US dollar if you look at the DXY Index, which compares how the US dollar is performing against other currencies. So there's no way to measure the value of the US dollar besides looking at its value and comparing it with other currencies around the world. So the world has sort of accepted that the Federal Reserve is the bank of last resort for almost all worldwide banks. Now, the Federal Reserve used to rely on its gold reserves to issue US dollars that represented an equal amount of gold value that were present in the bank's coffers. And around the 20th century, this stopped being the case, but people probably didn't realize that this happened because people don't read The Economist. And most countries around the world continued using the US dollar because it was the country of authority. It was a country that has the most power. It was a country that you probably had to deal with in some form of trade, or you wanted to sell your commodities or you wanted to sell your products or services to at some point, which meant that most countries around the world needed US dollar in some form because that's what US companies would take when they took payment from them. So because there's almost no other currency in the world that is used as much as the US dollar is, people rely on the US dollar. People resort to buying the US dollar every time they think a recession's about to hit, which is a little bit depressing because whatever country you live in, you know that your currency is going to drop in value every time a recession happens against the US dollar. But one of the cons of this happening is, of course, that companies in the US now have to sell a more expensive product or service to the rest of the world. So trades considerably drop in the US following a recession, and that is ultimately bad for the US economy as well. So if, of course, the world had a single common currency that they used or agreed on, then this wouldn't be the case. But for the time being, and probably for the next decade, the US dollar is going to stay the world's reserve currency, and the world is probably going to continue stacking up on US dollar every time a recession is about to happen. So make sure you subscribe to this channel and I'll see you again next time.